Hello, my name is James, I'm the Mayor of Jamestown, and today I have another Tartaglia team. Well, I say Tartaglia, it's more of a Nahida team, as you can probably already tell. So, as of late, I've kind of drifted in the direction of being a Tartaglia main. His kit is so much fun. When I initially played him, I was like, no, this is a little bit too complex for me. And then I was starting to get bored of playing the same old team for every piece of content because I was just burnt out completely. And I'm having a lot more fun with the game now. I'm actually experimenting with teams a bit more. And I've realized that Tartaglia is a ton of fun. And then Bloom came out. Well, Dendro came out. And it turned out Hyper Bloom is a ton of fun. Well, just ordinary Bloom was a ton of fun. But the only problem with regular Bloom is that you end up kind of killing yourself as time goes by. But now, by the wonderful element of Electro, that issue can easily be solved through Hyper Blooms. And there's a number of ways this can be achieved to make the Ultimate Tartaglia team better than the original Ultimate Tartaglia team that I technically came up with. Although technically, it's more of a Nahida team just because Nahida is absolutely insane. It's safe to assume that she's currently the best Dendro unit we have and probably will be for a very long time. And the main reason for this is that her E is insane. So you enter the aim mode, you basically select as many opponents as you can with her little camera, and they all get marked. And then all marks receive, if I'm not mistaken, like the same elemental reaction. So because this is Dendro, they will always have Dendro procced on them. So then with Tartaglia, you E, you get your Hydra application, and then you just left click until everything dies. And then on top of that, you've also got Raiden's E to trigger every single Electro reaction possible. And then you just have a ton of Hyper Blooms going off all the time. And then you have Yelan here because Yelan's Q is incredible. So yeah, the team is absolutely insane. The team itself is a lot of fun. So if you've pulled Nahida and you're wondering whether Child or Tartaglia, or whatever you want to call him, is a worthwhile addition to the team. If you don't have him already, because I don't feel he comes around very often. He comes out in the next couple of weeks. I believe it's Child or Yaimiko. To be honest, you don't have to worry about his E being too long now as well. Because of the meta kind of changing and teams kind of focusing less on a main DPS and more on hot switching between people, you're mainly going to be going Raiden E, Nahida, hold E, Yelan gets some energy, press Q, she ults, then you 2 Tartag, and then you do this a little bit until either your Nahida needs to do another one of these, or Raiden Shogun needs another one of these, or Yelan needs to do another ult, and then by the time you back up, Tartaglia's E is mostly back up anyway. In terms of demonstrations, I thought I'd come to the Spiral Abyss. I don't normally like using the Spiral Abyss as like a demonstration. I don't think I've ever actually used it as a demonstration before, but it seemed the easiest place. Child, you're very distracting when you're talking. It seems like the best place to get a bunch of units, because this team, single target, not so great. Loads of targets, fantastic. So let's just have a small demonstration, shall we?
Shine down. Here comes the catch. Bring it on.
So that's just a small demonstration of what the team can do. And I would just like to preface that none of my characters are built properly. So for instance, Child needs more crit and damage just in general. He needs to be stronger, but I've not been farming artifacts. Nahida doesn't have any artifacts on. She literally has the 4 set. They're all at +0 because they are all trash and I've not farmed anything. And then she's got a subpar Dendro thing because it's the only one I've got. Yelan I've kind of just, she's a mess. I need to work on her, but she's a mess. Same with Raiden. She exists. Her crit rate is atrocious. She's terrible, essentially. Most of my characters are built just good enough, usually. As long as they do the job, I'm not too fussed. And yeah, the team is a ton of fun. Now, you don't necessarily need to have Raiden Shogun if you don't have her. Because obviously not everyone is going to have all of these characters. Because I've just realized this is a team of all 5 stars. So, Raiden Shogun's E is probably the best Electro unit you could use. Just because of how consistent it is. But you can also use Kuki Shinobu. I know a bunch of people recommend Kuki Shinobu for Hyper Bloom. I don't like Kuki Shinobu, like, at all. I don't like her playstyle. It's just not, for me, she's not a character I find very enjoyable. But if you enjoy her, she's a great Hyper Bloom reactor, whatever you want to call. Beidou is phenomenal. Unfortunately, the downside with Beidou is that only her ult is really going to be of any use for Hyper Blooms. But she fits so incredibly well. Just because this team is mainly used for multi-targets. It's where it excels because you've got Tartaglia's Riptide, which is incredible. Nahida's E, which links everyone, which is kind of pointless on one target. Yelan doesn't really count. She's just incredibly high single target damage. And Beidou's ult flourishes with multiple people to go up against. So Beidou in this comp works just as well. If you don't like Kuki Shinobu, definitely recommend Beidou. Or, bit of a weird one that I tried using before Nahida came out.
Oh, you're taking me out?
I actually really liked Lisa as the team. Hyper Bloom, Triggerer, whatever you want to call it. Because while you can use this as her driver, but you miss out on basically everything Tartaglia does. And her E's aren't particularly phenomenal for what you're looking for. But her Q does so many ticks of electro damage. It's very satisfying to do, but is kind of short in terms of AoE, so you kind of have to keep people grouped together. So it's a little bit dodgy, but if you don't have any electro characters that you don't really like, you can make Lisa work. Fischl, possibly. I think you'd be hard pressed to use Fischl, I feel. Like, you can use her as like a set and forget, but I feel like you'd be missing out a little bit. And Dory, no. Kujo-Sara, also no. There'd be no consistency with the Electro as part of the problem. So I would recommend, if you don't have Raiden Shogun, Kuki Shinobu or Beidou, or at push, possibly Fischl. Sino, definitely not. Because obviously you need him for main DPS. In terms of Hydra application, you don't actually need Yelan. You could use Xingqiu. Everyone should have a good copy of Xingqiu. He's incredibly good. If you have both him and Yelan, they're just as good together as they are apart. So Xingqiu would also be a solid option. You don't necessarily have to use him as a Hydra applicator, sub DPS. You could also get a little bit crazy with it.
Let's head off.
And add in an Anemo character. I like Kazuha in the team, but I feel like he's not as useful as having someone that just
Who's our target this time?
does a ton of damage like Yelan does. But that's just my personal preference. But I know some people have been working Anemo into the team, and I mean, it works because you can group them all together, and then Tartaglia's Riptide is incredibly strong, and Nahida's grouping is great. Grouping? Her E is incredibly great, and then you've got Beidou's Q, or whoever you've got as Electro to do the AoE, and it's very satisfying when it works. Let's put it that way. If you're looking for another Anemo, Sucrose is also great, because obviously she can provide people with Elemental Mastery, which is exactly what Nahida wants. She wants EM, which is fantastic. So for the third slot, I would choose between either an Anemo or a Hydro. I like how much damage a Hydro puts out, so I would recommend either Xingqiu or Yalan. But if you want an Anemo character, Sucrose or Kazuha also works. Can't believe I've got his name there. You could also probably get away with Jean, but Jean has the problem of pushing enemies away more than sort of sucking them in, as weird as that is to say. Nahida, unfortunately, the team kind of revolves around having Nahida, so it's kind of a necessary evil. If you've got Nahida, you know how good she is. She's probably in most of, not all of your teams as of right now. She's just incredibly strong as a Dendro unit. If you're looking for a budget team that doesn't have Nahida for whatever reason and you need Dendro, Dendro MC is still good. I know some people are saying, oh, because he's the only half-decent Dendro unit in the game, he seems better than he actually is. I don't think that's entirely true. I think Dendro MC is actually a really solid Dendro applicator. I really like the ult, at least with Bloom. With Pyro, not so much. With Hydro, I'm a big fan. I really like it. It's nowhere near as good as Nahida's, but Nahida's a 5-star, and this is the main character literally everyone starts with. But if you are desperate for a Dendro applicator, and you really don't want to use the free Cole everyone got, which is understandable because her AoE range is atrocious, Dendro MC isn't a terrible replacement. I'm kind of sad that I have to replace him in almost every case for Nahida, because Nahida is just better at everything that he does, I'm afraid. And now for the main DPS. Obviously, I'm going to recommend Tartaglia. Tartaglia, his E is so much fun. His Q has great damage. The Riptide is incredibly satisfying. He's just, in terms of this team, which basically wants to do a ton of grouped up target damage, he is absolutely phenomenal. It's just, he's such a good character, and I feel he's slightly underrated because of his E being a little bit more complex than the average, but it's really not that bad. Once you use him for a few days, you'll get used to it, and you won't even notice yourself timing it anymore. It's just very easy to get to grips with. If for some reason you don't have Tartaglia, or you don't want to pull him, but you want a fun Hyperbloom team, and you want a sort of Hydro driver to do the job, there's a lot of different options. I know some people have been using Barbara, which is a bit weird, but I mean, it does the job. But there's also Candice. So I know Candice isn't particularly strong, which is a shame, but she can do Hydro Infusion with her ult, and her E is, well, her E is her E. But in terms of Hydro Infusion, it'll basically do the same properties as Tartaglia's E. Tartaglia is obviously is much stronger and is definitely the ideal option. But if you've got Candice and you need someone to do consistent Hydro application, give her a try. There's also Barbara, because obviously her left click is, her basic attack is always going to be Hydro. Same with Kokomi. I think they're a little bit weird in the team. I wouldn't personally recommend them myself, but that's mainly because I've got Tartaglia here anyway. So if for some reason you're looking for a budget version of this team, you could try this. It's no longer our Tartaglia Nahida team, but it is a really fun Hyperbloom team if you're looking for quite possibly the most budget-friendly version, because we've had 3 copies of Beidou, if you've been playing for long enough. We've had 3 copies of Xingqiu, if I'm not mistaken. But also, he's been in so many banners now that most people should have him. If not C6, C0 at least. Everyone has Dendro Traveler, or will get him at some point. And Candice is relatively recent, so I imagine most people have tried pulling for her anyway. So, yeah. It's not the best team, but it will do the job in a pinch. Let's see if I can demonstrate that, shall we? Now I'm going to try demonstrating the budget version of the team. It's not going to be anywhere near as good, but, you know, it's a start. And it's cheap, which is honestly my favorite word of all time. But let's go.
Spring forth!
Rain cutter. Eyes on me. Do your worst.
Scatter!
Grant us your blessing to ashes.
In all honesty, it wasn't great. It doesn't do its job very well. If anything, it triggers Electro Charge more often than Hyper Bloom does. So let's give it a try if the only character you have is Tartaglia.
Spring forth!
Witness the power of true power that ended hype. Happy to oblige.
Brace yourself. This is gonna hurt. Germinate!
Let me weave you a verse. Eyes on me.
Tidal wave. Shouldn't let your guard down.
So as it turns out, with a little testing, I don't think Beidou is actually a very good Hyper Bloom
If you ever want.
triggerer, activator. It doesn't seem to be triggering the Hyper Bloom as I was sort of expecting or hoping. So with that in mind, probably don't use Beidou unless you're looking for an Electro Charge Bloom team, because in which case you won't get many Hyper Blooms, but you will get a weird Bloom Taser comp. I'm not too sure what this is, but it was really fun all the same. With that in mind, probably best with Kuki Shinobu. We'll give that a try, and we will put Nahida back on, and we'll give that another go. Because ultimately, these two are all you really need for the team to work as well as it does. As long as you've got Tartag and Nahida, you're in for a good time. If you've already got Nahida and you really like Hyper Bloom, highly recommend pulling on Tartaglia if you don't already have him. This can be whoever you want. I like Yelan. You can use Xingqiu, it works just as fine. As an activator, again, I think Ryan Shogun does the best job just because she's incredibly consistent. But I think Kuki Shinobu will do the job, so we will give that a quick test now.
Hey. Witness the power of good lightning. Terrified. A bond is strong. Know my sword. Stand with me. Make yourselves a room. Rain cutter.
You can run, but you can't hide. You want this one? That's close enough.
A bond is strong. Rain outlines your fate. No.
Brace yourself. This is gonna hurt.
As you could see there, the team actually really works quite well with Kuki Shinobu. I was amazed at that, quite frankly. Originally, I was hedging all my bets on Beidou just because I really like Beidou as a unit, but I feel like she triggers Electro Charge more often than she ever does Hyper Blooms. But Kuki Shinobu, yeah, it's a little bit slow with her E, but it's consistent, and you don't need to have a 5-star to do the job. So, quite frankly, if you don't have Ryan Shogun, Kuki Shinobu is a great option. Again, Xingqiu can be replaced with whoever you so desire, pretty much. Make him Anemo, make him Hydro, do what you like. The team, again, would work without Nahida, yeah, it wouldn't be anywhere near as strong without these two paired together. But Dendro MC
There's
would
still a
also do the
long
trick.
road ahead.
As long as you've got Tartaglia, I feel like this team more than does what it needs to at a budget point. Yes, you can use Candice. Again, not great. She's not as quick. She's not as consistent. Barbara could also use if you just want to use her as the driver. But you can also use Nahida as the driver, because then you'll trigger so many different Dendro reactions. It's also quite fun. You can use Nahida as the driver, or you can use her as a sub DPS. I really like Tartaglia in the team, so he's the main DPS. But yeah, if for some reason, if you have Nahida and Tartaglia, they work incredibly well together. If you don't have Tartaglia, but you have Nahida, and you really like Bloom teams, use or get Tartaglia. The only time I would maybe say otherwise is if you have Nilou, because Nilou has her own unique reactions with Dendro cores. But as someone that doesn't have Nilou and doesn't want her, I would highly go for Tartaglia. If you don't have Nahida, this team will also do the trick. Kuki Shinobu, great Hyper Bloom triggerer. If for some reason you don't have Kuki Shinobu, you could get a bit cheeky and probably get away with using Lisa. I just really like Lisa. She's a lot of fun. I feel like she's very underrated. Again, you could replace Xingqiu with pretty much whoever you liked. He's more of a flex, to be honest. I just like having Yalan here. Again, if you don't want Kuki Shinobu and you have Raiden Shogun is a better option. And of course, Dendro MC is the best budget Dendro we have. Everyone's got one. But if you have Nahida, obviously, this team is more ideal. And this is probably going to be my final Tartag Gardener team, as I like to call it, until there is someone that does something incredibly unique with Hyper Bloom that I'm really interested in. Unfortunately, Nilou was not that person, but that's okay. Oh, and I would just like to say that for my demonstration, Kuki Shinobu is not built. She's level 80, sure. She has no artifacts, no weapons. So Constellation, she's C4. Good for her. No one is properly built, and yet the team is a ton of fun all the same. I'm a big fan of Hyper Bloom. Hyper Bloom is so much fun. They basically went, how can we make Tartaglia more fun? We'll give him bombs. And it has worked exceptionally well, and it's probably the main team I'm going to be sticking with for quite some time. Which is why I really need to hurry up and farm some stuff for Nahida, because she's lacking right now. Let's put it that way. But alas, all good things must come to an end. Thank you for those that stuck around until the end. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and all of that good stuff. And until next time, where hopefully there's another really fun team I have to bring to the table. But until that time, goodbye.